Since this pandemic has started, I've been locked away in my house with my nieces a lot. They've come over to sleep over, and my mom and I, we watch them and we take care of them and whatnot. And, typical babysitters, we experience a wide range of emotions. We're frustrated some days, irritated other days. We smile very little. Our patience are tested very lot. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are going on, and we're learning as we're going. And one thing that I'm realizing in my nieces, and these are some 3 and 4 year old girls, and I don't know if this is typical of all kids, but as they're getting older, their favorite word has switched from please to why. Like there was a time not too long ago when it was please. And they would say it all the time. Uncle, can I have this? Please. Grandma, can I go there? Please. And now it's, I need to go there? Why? I have to get this? Why? I need this? Why? Like it's why? I don't know if anyone else has that experience. Every time I ask them to do something, on a drop of a dime, they respond with why. And to make matters worse, they don't even ask why because they want to know why. They ask why because they want to know why they should care. I mean, she doesn't want to know why I asked her for a bottle of water. She wants to know what it has to do with her. I mean, she could care less if I'm thirsty. She's thinking in her little head of hers, if this doesn't affect me, if it ain't for me, if she isn't getting a treat for it, or if it doesn't bring her joy or laughter, if it ain't fun for her, then why should she do it? And she'll ask why every day of the week from sunrise to sunrise, trying to figure out what this has to do with her. Today, I want to explore the why factor, because I feel that understanding the why is one of the most important realizations in the Christian journey. That once you know why you do the things you do, figuring out what becomes so much easier. We hear this every single time that we come into our churches. We hear it over and over again. Preachers are saying, as a church, we're called to be the hands of God, to be the feet of God in the world. We're called to reach out to those who are in need. We're called to walk with those who are tired of walking this journey. And we're called to bring them back to the center. And this center, the one that we're reaching and walking and pulling people into, is our why. And if we never understand our why, then everything we do becomes a habit with no meaning. And sometimes even worse, it becomes an action that's done for a purpose. And usually the purpose has to do with ourselves, has to do with bringing our own self-joy, to show our friends that we're better than them, to show off or to show out, to collect favors so that people owe us something. They're in debt to us. Whatever it is, in almost every scenario, the why, the purpose or the intention is the motivation for the what, or the action. I do this. Why? Because of this. I mean, it's the simplest life mathematics equation that we'll ever have in our lives. Every action has some sort of motivation. Every motivation has some kind of purpose. Every purpose has an aim. And somehow, some way, it always comes back to and ties and boils down to the why. I mean, do you ever just stop and ask yourselves, why are we doing this? Why church? Why outreach? Why help? Why support? And it's important to ask these questions, not only because it gives our time and our efforts value and meaning, but also because the moment our why shifts away from Christ, all of our actions shift and they start aiming towards us. And everything that we do to our own glory. And so we have to ask why. I do this so I can get this. I stay away from that because I don't get anything out of that. And then we start developing modes and ways of thinking that go something like this. If it ain't in my backyard, I don't care. Build it. If I don't feel it, see it, or smell it, I don't care. Do whatever you want with it. And in the process, we start dividing up issues. These issues affect me, so I help in them. These are far from my house, so I'll leave it away. And we only take up causes that are personal and that only affect our lives on a personal level, but not understanding that every cause and every problem is personal to someone. We start leaving people out to dry with their own problems, fending for their own selves. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't look out for ourselves, that our lives don't matter. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't just stop at me. When I'm good and my life is set, then my work is done. I don't think we should think that way. I'm not suggesting that we should join every cause within a 100-mile radius. That's just impossible. Like, we have to admit that. I'm not talking about doing, I'm talking about being. And some people are so self-centered, so I-centered, that they have become their why. Some people are so into themselves, so I-centered, as I call it, that they have become their own why. And the way that they critique things, the way that they make decisions, the way that they choose, participate, function, and even live their life is according to just that, to them. They become the subject, the main character, the director, the punchline, the climax, the conclusion, the credits, the bloopers, every single day of every single movie, everywhere. I mean, just look around. We live in such an individualistic society. It's always about me. If I'm not collecting favors and IOUs, then I'm asking, what's in it for me? Or I'm saying, I don't need to be here. This doesn't benefit me at all. I mean, we've become so consumed with only doing good when it's good for us that we feel obligated to pay you back rather than pay it forward. In our passage today, we read of a man that not only disagreed with this way of thinking, but actually lived a life that countered it. This passage speaks of a person who most theologians refer to as glorious martyrs. Those who, when it came to their life, they didn't love their life more than their calling. They didn't love their life more than they loved their God. Because there are times when you have to shrink from your life and magnify your God. In the gospel, Jesus says it best. He says, if you love your life, you'll lose it. If you spend your days trying to capture, trying to save your life, making it all about you, then you'll lose it. But if you lose your life, if you give it away, you'll find it. This is someone that gave his life away for the sake of something greater, for the sake of the kingdom of God. And he actually loves it. I mean, it's one thing to do it, but it's another thing to do it and to love it. Paul in our passage is talking about freedom. Freedom from bondage, freedom from selfishness, freedom from greed, freedom from you. Freedom from what you're owed. Freedom from what you're entitled to. Freedom from only seeing the eyes in Christianity and not the Christ. Freedom to see the big picture. To see the true why and not being true to the I. Knowing why we do this. Paul is speaking to a mixed church. There are some former Jews, some former Gentiles, and they're trying to figure out this Christian church gathering thing that they have going on. And they're asking themselves, how do we do this? Do we follow the laws? Do we not? Do we follow kosher and eating practices? Do we not? Do we eat sacrificed meat? Or do we not? Like, how do we balance all of these things in a room filled with so many different people? And they have these questions and they're asking. Because some of us are doing this and others of us are doing that. Some of us are doing one thing and the others are doing a totally opposite thing. And they're asking Paul what they should do. They're free to make this decision, and they're bringing it to Paul to help them navigate through it. And Paul, in this letter, basically tells them that what is more important than your right is your relationship. Your relationship to one another, and most importantly, to God. He says, if you're right, something that you're owed, something that you're technically free to do, interferes with someone else's finding and living with Christ, if it causes your brother or sister to stumble, Paul says, if your rights become a stumbling block to the weak, then don't do it. If your rights become a stumbling block to somebody whose spiritual life is not that strong yet, then don't do it. Their spirituality is greater than your freedom. And he uses his own life as an example. He shows them, while defending his apostleship, that he not only teaches this, but he lives it. I mean, he had the right to get paid for his work that he did for the churches, but he forfeited that right. And he made his own money to support his own living. He was free to do what he wanted, and he forfeited that right. He became a Jew to the Jews, a Gentile to the Gentiles, weak to the weak. He forfeited all of his rights, and he became everything to everyone. And to the outsiders, it seemed like this guy is just being a sellout. Like Paul, his life was just inconsistent. Like he was putting on a face and being a hypocrite. One day he's this, the other day he's that, the next day he's that. But Paul in this passage is not talking about fitting in. He's talking about going into people's lives, their struggles, their stories, and looking for outlets to connect them to Christ. This is not one of those cases where Paul is standing for nothing and falling for everything. I don't think that's what Paul's talking about. It's about putting Christ first, not me or my rights or what I deserve or earn or what I'm owed. It's about Christ, a Christ that took on everything that I deserved and set me free. So I will use all of my freedom to give people the Christ they deserve. A sinner like me deserved nothing but trouble. God took that which I deserved on the cross. He took that trouble and he gave me freedom. And so I use that freedom to bring more people to Christ. How can I not? I mean, that was Jesus' whole point, to bring more and more people into the fold, to help them feel and embrace who they are in the family of God. It's centered around Christ. And it includes everyone. Your salvation, bringing you to the gospel, bringing you to Jesus, is the ultimate, the best way to use your freedom. I mean, I cannot overstate the importance of knowing the why. Until you know this, like really know this, not just in your minds, but in your heart and your soul, why we do this, then what Paul does and speaks of, laying down his life so that other people can lay down their lives for Christ, just won't make sense. I say this every week, and I think I say it because it's one of the most challenging aspects of the gospel. The gospel can be so scary sometimes. I mean, when Jesus comes in, the I in you joins so many other I's. You start connecting with people through Christ, and your life starts radiating light, not consuming it. And my life is not so good. It's not so perfect. I still have my own pitfalls and hardships, but I have come to experience this new thing in my life, salvation. I was going about my life. I was angry. I was blind and frustrated. And this experience happens. Along comes the gospel, and it changes me. And all of a sudden, my shackles weren't so heavy anymore. All of a sudden, I experienced life like never before. How can I not share this with other people? For me, it's like finding a cure to an illness or a disease that a billion other people are living with and struggling with. Like, how could you not share it? It's so good that you gotta, you wanna, you have to share it. Paul says that it wasn't me that got me here. It wasn't by anything I did or said or thought or created that got me to this point in my life where I see like I never saw before. To this point in my life where for the first time ever I experienced love like never before. The love of Christ, the warmth of Christ, the very presence of God has entered into my life. And I love it. It was all about Jesus. So everything I do is for others to help them find Jesus, to feel the same experience and the same encounter that I had with Jesus. Sometimes you go about living your life, and in your struggle and in your pain, Jesus comes along and he shows you the true beauty of life. And automatically you start living differently. You start living for others. You experience this oneness, not sameness. Oneness and sameness aren't the same things. You aren't becoming the same, you're becoming one. Your struggle becomes mine. Your worries becomes ours. Your pain becomes ours. In Jesus, we come connected. So for Jesus, I live connected to others, even if I have different interests, different goals, different stages in life. I enter into their lives by the blood of Christ so they can experience the love of Christ so much more vibrantly in their lives, even if it's just a little. Because we know that Jesus can take a little and make more than we can ever imagine. This is why we do what we do. Because we've been touched by God and we cannot help but to pass and share this with others. That's why. That's why we do this. Because Jesus did it for us first. Amen.